Hi, we're gonna talk about dimensioning today. Dimensioning. And dimensioning is a process that you gave the size, you label the drawing with the sizes. For example, if you have, let's say this is my T box last time, and we draw like this. And now this process, you gave the dimensions. It's called dimensioning. Let's say this the length of the box is 3 inches. The length of the box 3 inches. Okay, so we gave this the dimension here. Now, dimension in mechanical drawing is very strict. Very strict. Architect drawing is less strict, but still require you to be very precise. In mechanical drawing, it's very strict. I'm gonna talk about those rules. We got to follow those rules, which make the dimensioning process almost like an art. Almost like an art. And this is what we call the dimension. This one, the 3, is what we call a dimension. Dimension. And this one here, we call dimension line. Dimension line, which is a thin line. And this is extension line. Extension line. So both dimension line and extension line, there are thin line. Thin lines. Okay, so this is one here. Now I'm going to talk about those rules that makes dimensioning almost like an art and make the dimensioning kind of hard, challenging. The first rule is that you got to give enough dimensions. Give enough dimensions so that you don't have to, somebody read your drawing, don't have to guess how much is the size. Okay, for example, this is my box here. I gotta give it enough dimensions, okay, and I know that the width is 3 inches, and the depth, this one is 1.5 inch, and the height, this one is 2 inches. So give enough dimensions. Now, certainly that's the number one rule. With this rule, many of us has a tendency, you said, well, if you need enough dimensions, I'm going to dimension everywhere I can. Yes, this one is 2 inches too. I measured that. And this one is 1.5 inches. 1.5. Right? So the second rule is that no redundant dimensions. So basically this rule says if you know the size of this object from the dimensions, existing dimensions, if you know the size, you don't give a dimension. Okay, so if you know the size, then don't dimension it. Okay, let's say, take a look at this example here. Take a look at this example here. 2 inches, 2 inches. We already talked about orthographic views, the relative positions and the relative size, the right side view and the front side view, there are this height, this height. So this height and this height is the same. So certainly among those two, there's one that is redundant. Among those two, one is redundant. Okay. Now my drawing is a little bit off here. What is deceiving is this one here. This 1.5, and use AutoCAD, and you can find out, wow, this is also 1.5. So among those two, this is the depth. This is also the depth, the same depth. Among those two, one of them is redundant. So that's really tricky here. That's why it's so hard to make good dimensions. And now, number 3 rule is where you place the dimensions. And normally you place the dimensions that you don't crowd the drawing too much. So for example here, I put my waist dimension here. You don't want to put it, if it's too crowded, you don't want to put it here. So where you place dimensions. Number 4 rule is that this one here is related with manufacturing. Here it says dimensions should be placed on finished surface. Finished surface. Okay, I'm going to talk about that probably in another class. What is a finished surface here? Certainly, if we have a very smooth surface like my T-box here, those are all considered to be finished surface over there. But let's say if you have a cast, I don't have a sample here, if you have a cast iron piece, some surfaces are finished, some surfaces are considered to be not finished. Okay, so that's a rule here. Number 5 is that the dimension lines should not be crossed by any other line. Should not be crossed by any other lines. And should not be coincide with any other lines. What does this mean? For example, if you have this box here, you say, well, that's 3 inches. Hey, it's very easy, I just write 3 inches here. Let's just put an arrow here. That's 3 inches, right? And in fact, this is considered to be a dimension line. It's coincided with an object line here. So this is not allowed. And now what is crossed by some other lines? For example, if you have something like this, you say, well, let's say this is 4 inches here. That's 4 inches here. And this one here is 2 inches. Now in this situation, you'll see this dimension line, this 4-inch dimension line is crossed by an extension line here. It's crossed by an extension line. Okay, now in this situation is what we call step dimensions. That's a step dimensions. And in step dimensions, normally we put a smaller dimension inside, bigger dimensions outside. So in step dimensions, let's say that's a steps, we put a smaller dimension inside, and the bigger dimension, 4 is bigger than 2, outside here. So we do like this. Now, there's another thing here. Follow the previous 2 rules. Give enough dimension, no redundant dimension here. And if you put a dimension here, you say, well, okay, this one I measured is 2 inches. And those 3 dimensions over there, one is redundant. Number 6, no dimensions on hidden lines. No dimensions on hidden lines. Okay, let's say if you have a drawing like this, and now if you have a drawing like this, and there's a hole here. There's a hole like that over there. If it's a drawing like this, and those are all hidden lines, how do you dimension the hole here? You cannot put it here, because if you put it here, that's on hidden line. So what you do in this situation is that you gotta create another view. You create another view, and this view now it will have a visible hole here, and you're gonna put the dimensions here. Let's say which is 5D, 20D here. Okay, let's say that's a metric dimension. This dimension means the diameter of this hole is 5 millimeters, and the depth is 20 millimeters. My drawing is not to scale. So this rule means no dimensions on hidden lines. I give you one more rule, okay? And arc dimension by radius. And the circle dimension by diameter. What does this mean is that, for example, here, this is a circle. You dimension the circle by diameter. This phi means diameter. This psi means diameter. In standard, we use DIA, diameter. Okay. Now, if it's a partial, let's say if this corner is cut off here, and that becomes an arc. And this arc, we dimension by radius. And let's say normally it says this one, if it's R, normally it's R, let's say if it's R4, how about that? R4, 4 millimeters. So if the arc, you put a radius dimension over there. You don't dimension the diameter of this arc. If the circle, you don't dimension the radius of the circle. You give the diameter of the circle. Okay, so we have those 7 rules that you got to follow when you place a dimension. Okay, that's going to be the end of our lectures. Thank you.